I honestly believed I would never hear the name of my father's company again. Then an urgent email landed straight in my inbox, signed by the man himself. The terrifying part is not that he is begging for salvation, but that he has zero clue he is beseeching the very daughter he despised. I have exactly one night to decide if I should crush them or force them to kneel in the most legal way possible. My name is Colette Bennett, standing on the 42nd floor of the Rainier Square Tower. The world looks less like a city and more like a circuit board that I have personally soldered together. The morning fog of Seattle was just beginning to lift off the Puget Sound, revealing the steel-gray water underneath. It was 7:30 in the morning. This is my favorite time. The silence before the chaos. The moment before the 300 employees of Astrogrid Labs flood the elevators and the internal communication channels light up like a dashboard warning system. I pressed my hand against the cold floor-to-ceiling glass. From up here, the people down on 4th Avenue were just data points, variables in a logistical equation. I liked it that way. In the 5 years since I founded Astrogrid, we had grown from a desperate idea in a studio apartment to the leading enterprise data optimization firm in the Pacific Northwest. We were currently valued at over $800 million. I had everything under control, or at least, I thought I did. The heavy oak door behind me clicked open. I did not turn around. Only one person had the clearance to enter my office without knocking before 8 in the morning. "You are staring at the ferry boats again," Marina Holt said. Her voice was sharp, efficient, and clipped. "Coffee? Black? And we have a problem." I turned. Marina was already placing a steaming ceramic mug on my glass desk. As my chief operating officer, Marina was the only person who knew exactly how much coffee I needed to function, and exactly how little patience I had for ambiguity. She was holding a tablet against her chest, the screen facing her. That was never a good sign. "A problem?" I walked over to the desk, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically against the polished concrete floor. "Did the server migration fail in the Tokyo region?" "No. Infrastructure is green across the board," Marina said. She did not sit down. She swiped a finger across her tablet, casting a file onto the large wall-mounted monitor to my left. "It is an inbound partnership proposal. It came in late last night through the general vendor portal. The algorithm flagged it immediately." I frowned, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. Why would the algorithm flag a vendor proposal? Unless it is a competitor trying to phish us. "It is not a competitor. It is a red-level identity match," Marina said, her eyes scanning my face carefully. "You told me to set the filter for any inquiries originating from specific zip codes in North Carolina, or any executive officers with specific surnames." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees in a single second. I set the coffee mug down. I did not want to look at the screen, but I could not stop myself. The logo was dated, a blocky blue font that looked like it belonged in the late 90s. Bennett Integrated Systems, and below it, the sender information. Graham Bennett, founder and CEO. My breath hitched in my throat. A physical spasm that I hoped Marina did not notice. I had not seen that name in print for 6 years. I had not spoken to the man who owned it for nearly 7. Raleigh, North Carolina, the place I had run from in the middle of the night with nothing but a backpack and a bruised heart. "Colette?" Marina asked softly. She stepped closer. "Do you know this company?" The system flagged it as a personal conflict of interest. I stared at the name. Graham Bennett, my father, the man who was currently asking to partner with Astrogrid Labs. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. He was reaching out to the hottest tech firm in Seattle, likely desperate to modernize his failing legacy business. He had no idea that the CEO of Astrogrid was the same girl he used to tell to stop wasting time on computers. "I know them," I said. My voice sounded surprisingly steady. It sounded like a CEO's voice. "What is the nature of the proposal?" "It is vague," Marina replied, tapping the screen to scroll down. "They are claiming to have a proprietary data architecture that integrates with our backend. They want a licensing deal. They are bleeding cash. Colette, Their financials are attached. They have lost 40% of their market share in the last 3 quarters. They are looking for a lifeline. I walked around the desk and sat in my chair. The leather creaked. I felt a sudden, violent surge of nausea, followed immediately by a cold, hard rage. He was failing. The great Graham Bennett, the man who treated his business like a kingdom and his family like employees, was failing, and he had come to me for help, except he did not know it was me. "Set up a meeting," I said. Marina blinked. "Excuse me? You want to take a meeting with a vendor from Raleigh that is losing money? We usually delegate this to the regional managers." "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "I want to take this meeting, personally, clear my afternoon schedule for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Marina looked at her watch. "That is very short notice. Do you want me to prep a background dossier on them?" "I do not need a dossier. I know exactly who they are." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the glass desk. "Reply to the email. Tell Mr. Bennett that the CEO of Astrogrid Labs is interested in his proposal. Schedule him for 2 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow. Here, in this room." I paused, calculating the angles. "And Marina," I added, my voice dropping to a whisper, "when you send the confirmation, do not use my full name. Sign it as Colette, CEO. Ensure reception knows. When he arrives, his badge should just say, Visitor, and when I walk into that room, I do not want any bios or press kits on the table. He does not see my face until I walk through that door." Marina was a professional. She did not ask why. She simply nodded, her fingers flying across the tablet. "Understood. Colette, CEO, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Is that all?" "Yes, thank you." She turned and left the room, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. I was alone again. I swiveled my chair around to face the window. The city was waking up now. Cars were crawling along the interstate like ants. I closed my eyes, and the image of the Seattle skyline vanished, replaced instantly by the memory of a dining room in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was 14 years old. I was wearing an oversized hoodie, holding a laptop I had refurbished myself with parts bought from eBay. I had just shown my father a program I wrote to automate the inventory for the local church food bank. It was simple code, but it worked. I was so proud. I could still hear his voice. It was not angry. It was worse. It was dismissive. "You do not have a head for tech. Colette, you are just a dreamer. Leave the business logic to your sister. She has the instinct. You just have hobbies." Hobbies. He had dismissed my entire existence, my entire passion, as a trivial distraction. He had placed all his bets on my sister, Madeline, and now, 14 years later, his bet had failed. "It is just business," I whispered to the empty room, but I was lying to myself. This was not just business. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Graham Bennett was going to walk into my office. He was going to try to sell me a dying company. He was going to try to charm the CEO of Astrogrid Labs. This was not a negotiation. It was a trial, and there would be no judge, no jury, just me. I stood up and walked back to the monitor where the proposal was still displayed. I looked at the technical summary of their proprietary architecture. I squinted. Something about the data structure description caught my eye. It claimed to use a sharded logic retrieval method. I froze. That term, sharded logic retrieval, that was not an industry standard term. It was a phrase I had made up. I had written it in the margins of my notebooks when I was 20 years old, working on my capstone project in college. I had never published that paper. I had left it on my old hard drive back in the house in Knoxville the night I ran away. A cold chill went down my spine, sharper than the Seattle wind. Bennett Integrated Systems did not just have a failing business model. The only thing of value they had, the proprietary technology they were trying to sell to me, was stolen. And it was not just stolen from anyone. It was stolen from the daughter they said had no talent. I reached for the phone. Tomorrow was not going to be a reunion. It was going to be an execution. The rain in Seattle always reminded me of the humidity in Knoxville, Tennessee, but the temperature was different. In Seattle, the cold woke you up. In Knoxville, the heat suffocated you. It was a thick, heavy blanket that settled over the manicured lawns of the Bennett estate, trapping the silence inside our house. If you looked at our family photos from those years, you would see a perfect composition. My father, Graham, the pillar of industry; my mother, Diane, the graceful, silent support; and Madeline, my older sister by 4 years. Madeline was the sun. She burned bright, demanding attention, radiating the kind of charisma that made people want to agree with her before she even finished a sentence. I was the shadow. I existed to give the sun contrast, while Madeline was out mastering the art of the handshake and the boardroom smile. I was upstairs in my bedroom, the blinds drawn, bathed in the blue light of a monitor. I did not have mentors. I did not have expensive tutors. I had a shaky internet connection and a hunger that felt like a hole in my chest. I taught myself to code using free videos I found on forums, piecing together the logic of Python and C++, like a language I had been born speaking but had forgotten. I remember the day I finished my first real application. I was 16. It was a simple database management tool I had built for the local church to track their food drive donations. It automated the inventory, generated shopping lists based on deficits, and even mapped out delivery routes. It was clumsy by my current standards, but it worked. It was real. I ran downstairs. My laptop clutched against my chest like a shield. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs. I found my father in the den. He was on a call, pacing the Persian rug, his voice booming about supply chains and logistics. I waited. I stood by the doorframe for 20 minutes, just watching him. When he finally hung up, he looked at me, blinking as if he was surprised to find a teenager in his house. "Dad," I said, my voice too high, too eager. "I wanted to show you something. It is a program. I wrote it for the St. Jude Pantry." I put the laptop on his desk, right on top of his quarterly reports. I opened the interface. I showed him how the data flowed, how the logic sorting worked. I was talking fast, explaining the back end, the efficiency ratings. He looked at the screen. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. Then his phone buzzed. He looked away from my screen and picked up his BlackBerry. "That is nice, Colette," he said, already typing a reply to someone else. "Very organized." That was it. He did not ask how I did it. He did not ask about the code. He turned his back to look out the window, dialing another number from the leather armchair in the corner. Madeline laughed. She was flipping through a fashion magazine, her legs draped over the armrest. "It is cute, Colette," she said, flashing that perfect, polished smile. "It is like a digital scrapbook. Good for you for finding a hobby." A hobby. I closed the laptop. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I walked out, past the father who was already talking to a regional manager, past the sister who saw my passion as a toy. I thought if I just achieved more, if I just won something real, they would see me. 6 months later, I won the state coding competition. I had built an algorithm that optimized traffic light patterns to reduce congestion. I stood on a stage in Nashville, holding a plastic trophy that looked like gold. Shaking hands with the governor, I was the only girl in the top 10. The judges called me a prodigy. I had texted my father the moment they announced my name. I won, first place in the state. I held my phone the entire bus ride home, staring at the screen, waiting for it to light up. I imagined a dinner. Maybe he would take us to the steakhouse downtown. Maybe he would toast to me this time. The reply came 3 hours later. "Good job." 2 words, no punctuation, no emoji, just a transaction. Acknowledgement received. When I got home, the house was empty. Madeline was out with friends. Mom was asleep. Dad was at the office. I put the trophy on my bookshelf, behind a row of old textbooks, where I would not have to look at it. The dynamic never shifted. It only calcified. Madeline was the heir apparent. She was not technical, but she knew how to mirror our father. She laughed at his jokes. She adopted his disdain for weakness. She dressed in power suits before she even graduated college. He took her to golf retreats in Hilton Head. He took her to client dinners in Atlanta. He introduced her as the future of Bennett Integrated Systems. I was introduced, if at all, as Madeline's little sister. The final fracture happened on a Tuesday night in November. It was my senior year of high school. My mother had cooked a roast, my father's favorite. The candles were lit. The good china was out. My father tapped his wine glass with a silver fork. "I have an announcement," he said, beaming. He looked younger when he looked at Madeline. "As you know, your sister graduates this spring. I have decided she will not be starting in junior management. Madeline will be joining the executive team immediately as the vice president of operations." Madeline feigned surprise, covering her mouth with a manicured hand, but her eyes were triumphant. She knew. She had always known. I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. "Vice president?" I asked. "But she has never managed a project. She does not know the systems." "She knows people," my father said sharply, his smile vanishing as he turned to me. "That is what leadership is. Colette, strategy." "I know the systems," I said. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I know how the company runs better than she does. I read the technical audits. I could help. I could—" "Colette, stop," my father cut me off. His voice dropped to that calm, reasonable tone that was far more terrifying than his shouting. "We have discussed this. You are not built for this world." "What world?" I demanded. "The world of business? I am top of my class in calculus. I am building software that engineers twice my age cannot figure out." "It is not about intelligence," he said, sighing as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum over a toy. "It is about temperament. You are too sensitive. You take everything personally. Look at you now, raising your voice." He leaned in, his eyes cold and flat. "You cannot handle pressure. Colette, you would crack in a week. Madeline has the spine for it. You? You are a dreamer. You belong in a back room somewhere, safe from the real work." The silence that followed was total. I looked at my mother, Diane Bennett. She was staring intently at her roasted potatoes, cutting them into tiny, precise squares. She did not look up. She did not defend me. She did not say a word. I stood up. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just felt something inside me turn to ice. "Excuse me," I said. "I am not hungry." I walked upstairs, went into my room, and sat in the dark. I did not turn on my computer. I just sat there, letting the darkness absorb me. Hours later, the house was silent. I went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The lights were off, but the moonlight spilled across the marble countertops. My mother was there. She was standing by the sink, still wearing her pearls, scrubbing a pot that was already clean. She froze when she saw me. We stood there in the shadows, two ghosts in a house built for one king. "He loves you," she whispered. It was a lie we both knew by heart. "He just worries about you. He thinks I am weak," I said. My mother dried her hands on a towel. She walked over to me. She was smaller than me now. She reached out and touched my cheek, her hand trembling slightly. "You are not weak," she said, her voice so low I almost missed it. "You feel things. That makes you dangerous to men like him. They think lack of emotion is strength. They are wrong." She pressed something into my palm. It was a small, crumpled $20 bill. It was nothing, but it was everything she had access to without asking him. "Do not listen to him, Colette," she said, looking toward the stairs to make sure we were alone. "Do not let him make you small. And whatever you do, do not stop building your things. One day, you will build something so big, even he cannot look away." She kissed my forehead and went upstairs, leaving me alone in the dark kitchen. I looked at the $20 bill. I looked at the dark hallway where my father slept, confident in his kingdom, confident that he had chosen the right heir, confident that I was nothing more than a glitch in his perfect system. That was the night the sadness ended, and the calculation began. I went back to my room, turned on my computer, and opened a new file. I did not cry myself to sleep. I coded until the sun came up. If I was not going to be the sun, I decided I would be the storm that blocked it out. The letter in my pocket felt heavy, like it was made of lead rather than paper. It was a full scholarship offer to one of the most prestigious computer science programs in the country. I had not told anyone yet. I had saved it for Thanksgiving. I had this foolish, cinematic idea that if I presented it at the dinner table, flanked by the turkey and the cranberry sauce, it would be undeniable. It would be a tangible proof of worth that even Graham Bennett could not dismiss as a hobby. The dining room was full of extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles. The air smelled of rosemary and expensive wine. I sat there, clutching the fabric of my dress, waiting for a lull in the conversation. My heart was beating against my ribs like a trapped bird. My father stood up. He held his crystal wine glass by the stem, the red liquid swirling as he tapped it with a spoon. The room went silent. He smiled. That charismatic, boardroom smile that made everyone feel like they were part of his winning team. "I want to propose a toast," he began, his voice booming, "to family, and to the future." He turned his body slightly, angling towards my sister. Madeline was beaming, wearing a dress that likely cost more than my entire first car. "As many of you know, Madeline is stepping up to lead our new logistics expansion," he said. A ripple of applause went around the table. He waited for it to die down. "It is a massive responsibility, but I have never seen anyone with sharper instincts. She is the backbone of this family's legacy." I took a breath. This was it. He would turn to me next. He would have to acknowledge that his other daughter was going to a top-tier university on merit alone. He did turn to me. The smile softened, becoming patronizingly sweet. "And to Colette," he said. My hand tightened on the letter in my pocket. "Our little artist," he continued, "always tinkering away in her room. It is good to have someone in the house who does things just for the joy of it. Keeps us grounded. To Colette, for reminding us that not everything has to be serious business." The table chuckled. It was a warm, indulgent sound. They thought he was complimenting me. They thought he was praising my spirit. But I knew the code. He was saying I was irrelevant. He was saying I was a pet, not a player. I froze. The speech I had prepared died in my throat. I looked at the letter's outline against my thigh. If I pulled it out now, it would look like a desperate plea for attention. It would look pathetic. "To the Bennetts," the table chorused. I let go of the letter. I picked up my water glass and drank. I did not say a word. I ate the turkey. I ate the stuffing. It all tasted like ash. 4 years later, the ash was still there. I sat in a sea of black polyester robes. The stadium was deafening. Names were being called out over the loudspeakers. A monotonous rhythm of achievement. I scanned the VIP box where the families were seated. I saw my mother immediately. She was wearing a pale blue suit, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked small against the vastness of the arena. The seat next to her was empty. I checked my phone, hidden in the folds of my gown. There was a notification from him, not a call, not a text message with words, just a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. 4 years of sleepless nights, of learning advanced algorithms, of carrying a double major, of graduating with honors. And all I got was a generic pixelated thumb. He had not even bothered to type congratulations. He was probably on a golf course, or maybe in a meeting about the company's declining quarterly projections. When my name was called, I walked across the stage. I took the diploma. I did not smile for the camera. After the ceremony, I found my mother near the parking lot. She looked tired. When she saw me, she stepped forward and hugged me. It was a fierce, desperate hug. She smelled of her expensive perfume and the faint, lingering scent of sadness. "I am sorry," she whispered into my ear. Those 3 words shattered me more than his absence ever could, because she was not apologizing for being late. She was apologizing for him. She was apologizing for the reality we both lived in. She was accepting it, and by apologizing, she was confirming that it would never change. I pulled away. "It is fine, Mom, really." He had a crisis at the firm. She lied. She was not even good at it anymore. Let's just go home, I said. That night, the house in Knoxville felt like a museum of a life I no longer recognized. I sat in my room, my diploma tossed carelessly onto the bed. I waited. I told myself I did not care, but the child inside me was still waiting for him to come upstairs, to knock on the door, to say, "I missed it, but I am proud." The hours ticked by. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight. Finally, the landline on my desk rang. I picked it up. "Colette." His voice came through, tinny and distracted. "You home?" "I am," I said. "I graduated today, Dad." I know. Big day. Look, I am swamped down here in the study. Madeline and I are going over the Q3 projections. It is a bloodbath." He did not ask about the ceremony. He did not ask about my degree. "Listen," he continued, shifting gears. "Since you are done with school now, we need to find you something to do. You cannot just float around." "I have a degree in computer science," I said, my voice steady. "I was thinking I could look at the system architecture for the new logistics branch. I have some ideas about automation." He laughed. A short, sharp bark. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Honey, you have never worked a day in a real office. Tell you what, I spoke to HR. We have a spot opening up in the archives department, data entry, digitizing old client records. It is low stress, steady hours, perfect for you to get your feet wet. Data entry." He was offering me a job that a high school dropout could do. He was offering to bury me in the basement, typing numbers into a spreadsheet, while my sister sat in the boardroom. He looked at my degree, my passion, my mind, and he saw a typist. "Data entry," I repeated. "It pays $15 an hour," he said, generous as a king throwing scraps to a peasant. "Think about it. We can do paperwork on Monday." He hung up. I sat there listening to the dial tone. The clarity was sudden and absolute. It was not a decision. It was a physical necessity, like gasping for air after being held underwater. If I stayed in this house one more night, Colette Bennett, the person I wanted to be, would cease to exist. I would become the person he saw. I would wither away in that archive room until I was just a ghost haunting the family payroll. I stood up. I pulled my suitcase out of the closet. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I packed light, my laptop, my hard drive containing every line of code I had written in the last 4 years, 3 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts, the envelope with my savings, $3,000 I had scraped together from tutoring. I did not write a note. A note would imply there was a conversation to be had. This was not a conversation. It was an evacuation. I walked down the stairs, trying to keep my footsteps silent on the hardwood. The house was dark, but the moonlight streamed through the foyer windows. My mother was standing at the bottom of the stairs. I froze, my hand gripping the banister. She was wearing her silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked at the suitcase in my hand. Then she looked at my face. She did not ask where I was going. She did not ask me to stay. She did not cry. She walked over to me. In her hand was a thick white envelope. She reached out and tucked it into the side pocket of my backpack. "Go," she whispered. It was not a command. It was a permission. "Mom," I started, my voice cracking. She shook her head, pressing a finger to her lips. She reached up and touched my face one last time, her thumb brushing away a tear I did not know had fallen. Then she stepped back, fading into the shadows of the living room. I walked out the front door. I did not look back at the house. I did not look at the window of the study where my father was likely still awake, building a legacy that had no room for me. I walked down the long driveway to the main road, the wheels of my suitcase humming against the pavement. I called a taxi to take me to the bus station. I was going to buy the first ticket west, anywhere that was not Knoxville, anywhere that Graham Bennett's shadow could not reach me. I was 22 years old. I had no job. I had no plan. But as the cool night air hit my face, I felt the first true breath I had taken in years. The Greyhound bus smelled like wet wool and stale cigarette smoke. It took 3 days to get from Knoxville to Tacoma, Washington. I chose Tacoma because it was close enough to the tech hub of Seattle to feel relevant, but far enough away that I could actually afford rent. I found a studio apartment above a laundromat for $600 a month. It had a leaking faucet that dripped in a syncopated rhythm and a view of a brick wall. But it was mine. For the first 6 months, I existed in a state of controlled delirium. By day, I was a ghost on the internet, picking up freelance coding gigs on Upwork for $15 an hour. I built websites for dog walkers. I fixed database errors for local dentists. I ate instant noodles and drank tap water. But at night, the real work began. I was rebuilding the architecture I had started in college, the one my father had dismissed as a hobby. I stripped it down and rebuilt it, obsessing over every line of code until my eyes burned. One rainy Tuesday, when my bank account balance hovered dangerously close to double digits, I finally opened the envelope my mother had shoved into my backpack. I poured the contents onto my scratched laminate table. There was cash, $2,000 in hundreds. It was a lifeline, but in the grand scheme of a startup, it was nothing. It would buy me 2 months of rent and server space. But there was something else stuck to the bottom of the envelope. A heavy, cream-colored business card. Evelyn Cross, Venture Capital. There was a handwritten note on the back in my mother's elegant script. She owes me a favor. Use it. I stared at the card for 3 days. I researched Evelyn Cross on the library computer. She was a legend in the Pacific Northwest. She had backed 3 unicorns before they were even ponies. She was known for being ruthless, brilliant, and impossible to reach. Fear paralyzed me. If I called her and she said no, that was it. The safety net was gone. I would just be another failure in a rainy city. But on the 4th day, when my landlord threatened eviction over a late fee, I realized I had no luxury left for pride. I dialed the number. Assistant answered. I stammered something about Diane Bennett. I was put on hold for 20 minutes. Then, a sharp, gravelly voice came on the line. "You are Diane's girl?" "Yes," I said. "I have a product. I need 10 minutes. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, the Grind Coffee House on 6th Avenue. Do not be late. You have exactly 10 minutes. The line went dead. I stayed up all night rehearsing. I did not have a pitch deck. I did not have a marketing strategy. I had a laptop and a demo environment. I walked into the coffee shop at 7:45. Evelyn Cross was already there, typing on a phone that looked like it controlled a small country. She was in her 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a suit that cost more than my entire life's earnings. I sat down. She did not look up. "Start," she said. I opened my laptop. "I do not have slides. I have a problem and a solution. Enterprise data retrieval is slow because it relies on linear indexing. It is like looking for a book in a library by walking down every aisle. I built a system that predicts where the book is before you even ask for it." I turned the screen to her. I ran a query on a dummy database of 10 million records. The result was instantaneous. 0.03 seconds. Evelyn stopped typing. She looked at the screen, then she looked at me. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. "Do it again," she commanded. I ran a more complex query. 0.04 seconds. She closed my laptop. The sound echoed in the small shop. My heart stopped. "It works," she said. "But the tech is only half the battle. You are a Bennett. I know your father. I know his company. He is loud. He is old-fashioned. And he is drowning." I stiffened. "I am not him." "Prove it," Evelyn said. She leaned forward. "I will give you a seed round of $250,000, but I have conditions. 1, you incorporate in Delaware. 2, you stay lean. 3, and this is non-negotiable, you never use the Bennett name to get in a door. You do not tell people who your father is. You do not sell a sob story about being the underdog daughter. You are a ghost. You win on the merit of the code, or you do not win at all." "Done," I said without hesitation. "Good," she said, standing up. Welcome to the big leagues, Colette. Astergrid Labs was born that afternoon. The next 2 years were a blur of velocity. I moved out of the studio and into a shared office space. I hired my first 5 engineers. They were misfits. People who had been rejected by the big tech giants for being too weird or too obsessed. They were perfect. Then came Marina Holt. I met her at a tech mixer I had been forced to attend. I was hiding by the drinks, terrified of small talk. Marina walked up to me, assessed my discomfort in 2 seconds, and handed me a sparkling water. "You are the one who wrote the Astergrid kernel," she said. It was a statement, not a question. "Your code is brilliant. Your social skills are tragic." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in months. "I need someone who can talk to humans so I do not have to," I said. "I am expensive." Marina replied. "I will give you equity," I countered. She joined the next day as my chief operating officer. Marina became my shield. She handled the hiring, the firing, the client dinners, the press releases. She understood that I needed silence to think. She never asked about my family. She saw the empty space where my past should be, and she simply built a wall around it to protect me. We landed our first Fortune 500 client 6 months later, then another, then a government contract. The revenue graph went vertical. We moved from Tacoma to Seattle, taking a half floor in a skyscraper, then a full floor, then 3. The day the article came out, I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the Sound. Forbes had listed Astergrid Labs as the newest unicorn in the cloud sector. Valuation, $1.2 billion. There was a photo of me on the cover. I was wearing a black turtleneck, arms crossed, looking serious and capable. The headline read, "The Silent Architect: How Colette Bennett Built an Empire from Nothing." I touched the glossy paper. $1.2 billion. I had done it. I had built something so big he could not look away. Just like Mom said. But when I went home to my penthouse that night, the silence was deafening. I checked my phone. There were hundreds of messages from former classmates, investors, and employees. There was nothing from the 865 area code. I sat on my expensive Italian sofa and realized the cruel joke of success. I had climbed the mountain. I was standing at the summit, the air thin and cold, but the view did not make the ache in my chest go away. I had surpassed Graham Bennett's net worth in 5 years. I had built a better company, a better culture, a better product. But in my head, I was still the 14-year-old girl holding a laptop, waiting for him to look up from his phone. The victory was massive, undeniable, and lucrative. But it was also hollow, because I realized I did not just want to win. I wanted him to lose. I wanted him to feel the same irrelevance he had forced onto me. And as I looked at the city lights below, I knew that the universe has a funny way of answering prayers. I just did not know that the answer would come in the form of a desperate email from a man who had no idea he was walking into a trap set by his own blood. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Astergrid Labs was designed for intimidation, not hospitality. The walls were soundproofed glass, offering a panoramic view of Seattle that made the city look like a toy set. The table was a slab of polished black obsidian, cold to the touch, and long enough to seat 20. Though I had ordered only 4 chairs to be placed at the far end, I sat at the head of the table. The lighting was deliberately cool, casting sharp shadows. I wore a tailored white suit, a stark contrast to the black room. It was a visual statement. I was the light. I was the energy. They were coming into my gravity well. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Marina opened the heavy glass doors. "The delegation from Bennett Integrated Systems," she announced, her voice devoid of emotion. 3 people walked in. First was Graham Bennett, my father. He looked smaller than I remembered. The imposing giant of my childhood had shrunk inside his expensive charcoal suit. His hair was completely white now, and there were deep lines etched around his mouth, the kind that come from sleepless nights and falling stock prices. Behind him was Madeline. She had not changed as much, but the brightness was gone. She wore a red dress that was too loud for a business meeting, an attempt to project a confidence she clearly did not feel. She was clutching a leather portfolio like a shield, and trailing them was a man I recognized from industry dossiers but had never met. Warren Klein. He was a member of their board, short, balding, with eyes that darted around the room, appraising the furniture, the view, and finally, me. He looked like a man who checked the exits before he checked the menu. I stood up. I forced a smile that did not reach my eyes. "Welcome to Astergrid," I said. Graham stepped forward, extending his hand. He looked at me. He looked right into my face. "Ms. Bennett," he said. "It is a pleasure. Graham Bennett." He did not know. He was shaking the hand of the daughter he had raised for 22 years, the daughter whose room was down the hall from his, and he saw a stranger. It was the ultimate validation of my childhood. I had been so invisible to him that even my face was a blank canvas in his memory. I took his hand. His grip was loose, damp. "Please, call me Colette." "Colette," he repeated, tasting the name without a flicker of recognition. A strong name. Madeline stepped up next. She shook my hand, and for a second, she paused. She narrowed her eyes, tilting her head slightly to the left. A spark of confusion lit up her face. She was searching her databanks, trying to place me. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of polite disinterest. I knew what she saw. A woman with the same jawline, the same eyes, but the Colette she knew wore oversized hoodies and looked at the floor. The Colette standing in front of her was the CEO of a billion-dollar company, wearing Italian silk and looking down at her. "Have we met?" Madeline asked, her voice uncertain. "I am afraid not," I lied smoothly, "but I have read a lot about your operations." Madeline. The flattery worked. The suspicion vanished, replaced by vanity. She smiled, relieved. "Of course, it is great to finally meet a female CEO in this space. Please, sit," I said, gesturing to the chairs arranged on the opposite side of the table. I sat down. Marina took her place to my right, opening her tablet. Warren Klein sat at the end, leaning back, watching me. He did not speak. He was measuring me. He was trying to figure out if I was a predator or prey. "Let us not waste time," I said, folding my hands on the black table. "I reviewed your initial email. You are looking for a strategic partnership. But frankly, Mr. Bennett, your financials suggest you are looking for a rescue." Graham stiffened. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "The market has been volatile," Graham said. "We have faced some headwinds in the last 4 quarters. Legacy contracts are expiring, and the pivot to cloud-based solutions has been slower than anticipated. You have lost 40% of your market share in 12 months, I said, cutting through his euphemisms, and 3 of your 5 biggest clients have migrated to my platform. You are not facing headwinds. Graham, you are in a tailspin." The room went silent. Graham looked shocked that I would speak so bluntly. In his world, meetings were a dance of polite lies. In my world, data was the only language. "We have a plan," Madeline interjected. Sensing her father's falter, she stood up and connected her laptop to the room's projection system. "If you look at our restructuring roadmap, we are poised for a significant rebound." She began her presentation. It was exactly what I expected. A parade of buzzwords, synergy, paradigm shift. Holistic integration, digital-first ecosystem. It was beautiful, polished, and completely empty. She spoke with the practiced cadence of someone who had been trained to sell air. She talked about optimizing workflows and streamlining management, but she carefully avoided the one thing that mattered: the technology. I watched her, bored. She was still the same Madeline. Style over substance. She thought she could charm an algorithm after 15 minutes. I raised my hand. "Stop," I said. Madeline froze mid-sentence. "Excuse me?" "You are showing me marketing slides," I said cold. "I do not care about your brand refresh. I do not care about your mission statement. I want to know why your product failed, and what you actually have that is worth saving." Madeline looked at her father, panic flaring in her eyes. Graham looked defeated. Warren Klein leaned forward. "We have an asset," he said. His voice was raspy, like dry leaves. "A new architecture. We call it the Core X engine. It is not fully deployed yet, but the beta tests show retrieval speeds that match yours." "Match mine?" I raised an eyebrow. "That is a bold claim." "We can prove it," Graham said, eager to regain control. "Madeline, show her the technical schematics." Madeline clicked to the next slide. "This is the backbone of our new system," she said, her confidence returning slightly. "It utilizes a unique non-linear fetching protocol." I looked at the screen. The world stopped. Projected on the wall was a diagram of a database structure. It was complex. A web of nodes and logic gates designed to bypass traditional indexing. I knew that diagram. I knew it because I had drawn it on a napkin in a diner in Tacoma 5 years ago. I knew it because the specific way the data shards were routed, looping back through a tertiary cache, was a quirk of my own coding style. It was a mistake I had turned into a feature. It was my architecture, but it was not the architecture of Astrogrid. It was an earlier version, a version I had worked on during my senior year of college, a version I had left on the hard drive of the computer in my bedroom in Knoxville, the computer I had left behind the night I ran away. My blood ran cold, then hot. They had not developed this. They had scavenged it. They had gone into my old room, turned on my abandoned computer, and found the ghost of my work. And instead of calling me, instead of asking me, they had taken it, rebranded it, and were now trying to sell it back to me. I felt a physical wave of nausea, followed by a rage so pure it felt like clarity. "This architecture," I said. My voice was very quiet. "It is unique. It is proprietary," Graham said, puffing out his chest. "Developed in-house by our R&D team over the last 2 years." "In-house," I repeated. "Yes," Madeline added. "It is our crown jewel." I looked at Warren Klein. He was watching me closely. He saw something in my face. He saw the shift. He stopped leaning back. He sensed danger. "Is there a problem, Miss Bennett?" Warren asked softly. I looked away from the screen and locked eyes with my father. "No problem," I said. "But before we proceed any further, I have a condition." "Name it," Graham said. "I want absolute transparency," I said. "And I want a full technical audit. I want my engineers to examine the source code of this Core X engine. Today, right now, if it is as good as you say, you have nothing to hide." Madeline hesitated. "That is highly irregular. The IP is sensitive." "We are bleeding cash, Madeline," Graham snapped at her. Then he turned to me. "You have a deal. You can look at the code." I nodded slowly. "Good," I said, "because I have a feeling I'm going to find it very familiar." I stood up. Signaling the meeting was over. As they gathered their things, looking relieved that they had survived the first round, I looked back at the screen one last time. There, in the corner of the diagram, was a small annotation in the comment block of the code snippet they had pasted into the slide. To do, fix the latency in the midnight loop. I remembered writing that note. I remembered the exact moment. It was 3:00 in the morning, 2 days before graduation. My mother had brought me a cup of tea. They were selling my memories, and they were going to pay for it with everything they had. The lights in the Astrogrid server room hummed with a low, blue frequency that usually calmed me. Tonight, it felt like the buzzing of a trapped insect. It was 3 in the morning. I had not gone home. I had not eaten. I was standing behind the chair of my lead security engineer, a brilliant 24-year-old named David, who treated code like a contact sport. "We are in," David said, his fingers flying across his mechanical keyboard. "The due diligence clause in the preliminary agreement gave us read-only access to their repository. It is messy. Colette, their version control is a nightmare. Just find the core logic," I said. My arms crossed so tightly against my chest that my ribs ached. "I want to see the retrieval algorithm, the bottom layer." David typed a command. Lines of code cascaded down the screen. A waterfall of green text. "Okay, here it is," he said, squinting. "This is weird. The syntax style changes halfway through. The wrapper looks recent, sloppy, but the kernel is elegant. It is dense. It looks like—" He stopped. He turned in his chair to look at me. "It looks like your code. Colette, the syntax matches the legacy drivers you wrote for Astrogrid back in the garage days." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had suspected it. I had feared it. But hearing it from an objective third party made it real. It was no longer a paranoid delusion of a neglected daughter. It was a forensic fact. "Keep digging," I ordered, my voice barely a whisper. "Map every dependency." The door to the server room hissed open. Marina walked in. She was still wearing her suit from the day before, though she had ditched the blazer. She looked exhausted and irritated. "Colette," she said sharply, "you need to sleep, and you need to tell me what is going on." I did not turn around. "I am doing due diligence. Marina, standard procedure." "This is not standard," Marina snapped. She walked over and stood between me and the monitors. "We have acquired 5 companies in the last 2 years. You never supervised the code audit personally at 3 a.m. You never shook while you drank your coffee. You are obsessed with this failing company from North Carolina. Why?" I looked at her. Marina was my closest ally. She was the only person in the world I trusted. And right now, I had to lie to her. If I told her Graham Bennett was my father, she would be legally obligated to report the conflict of interest to the board. She would have to recuse me from the deal. I would lose control. "I have a history with their VP." I lied, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. "A professional rivalry from college. I need to know if they stole my work." Marina studied my face. She was a human lie detector. She narrowed her eyes, searching for the twitch, the tell. "A college rivalry," she repeated, flatly. "And that is why you looked like you wanted to execute their CEO in the conference room?" "The code." "Marina," I said, pointing to the screen to deflect her. "Look at the code." She turned to look, but the suspicion in her eyes did not vanish. It just settled deeper, a hairline fracture in the foundation of our partnership. By 6 a.m, the preliminary report was ready. I was in my office, staring at the sunrise bleeding through the fog. David knocked on the doorframe. He held a printed stack of papers. He looked uncomfortable. "Boss," he said, "you are going to want to see this." I waved him in. "What did you find?" "We traced the directory structure back to the source," David said, placing the papers on my desk. "Whoever built their system did not build it from scratch. They imported a folder. They tried to rename the files, but they forgot to scrub the root directory metadata." He pointed to a highlighted line on the second page. "Source directory, /users, /admin, /documents, /backup, /cb_capstone_rev." The room spun. "CB, Colette Bennett, Capstone, my senior project, revision." I reached out and touched the paper. My hand was trembling so violently that the paper rustled. It was undeniable proof. They had not just stumbled upon similar logic, they had physically taken the files from my old computer. I could see the scene in my head perfectly. Graham Bennett, desperate, watching his company sink. Madeline, clueless, needing a miracle. My mother, perhaps mentioning that I was always working on some big project before I left. And Graham, the man who told me I had no talent, the man who told me to do data entry, ordering someone to crack open my hard drive and harvest the very genius he had mocked. He did not just despise me. He was feeding off me. He was a parasite attached to the memory of the daughter he had driven away. "Get out," I whispered. David blinked. "Excuse me?" "Leave the report. Get out. I need a minute." David scrambled out of the room, closing the door. I sank into my chair. A scream was building in my throat, hot and jagged, but I swallowed it down. I wanted to pick up the phone. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to call the press. Billionaire CEO exposes family theft. It would be the story of the year. Bennett Integrated Systems would be raided by federal marshals. The stock would hit zero. Graham would be disgraced. Madeline would be unhireable. I reached for the phone to call our general counsel, but my hand hovered over the receiver. I thought about the employee roster attached to the due diligence file. 250 people, engineers, sales reps, receptionists, janitors, people with mortgages, people with kids in college, people like I was when I arrived in Tacoma, desperate and needing a paycheck. If I sued Graham today, the company would implode instantly. The assets would be frozen. The employees would be on the street by Friday. I would win, but I would leave a crater. I pulled my hand back. Was that who I wanted to be? Was I just going to be another Graham Bennett, destroying lives to prove a point? If I burned the village to kill the monster, was I any better than him? The intercom buzzed. It was Marina. "Colette." Her voice was cool, distant. "The Bennetts are asking for a follow-up meeting to discuss the preliminary terms. They want to know if the technical audit is finished." I stared at the highlighted line on the paper. CB_capstone_revern. I had the gun. I had the bullets. But if I fired now, it was too clean. It was too quick, and it would hurt the wrong people. I needed to perform surgery, not drop a bomb. I needed to separate the parasite from the host without killing the host. "Tell them the audit is inconclusive," I said, my voice steadying. "Tell them we need deeper access. Tell them we need to interview their product lead." "Their product lead is Madeline," Marina said. "You want to interview her?" "No," I said. "I want to interrogate her, but call it a strategy session." "Colette," Marina said, and the pause that followed was heavy. "You are playing a game, and you are not telling me the rules. This puts the firm at risk." "I am protecting the firm," I said. "Trust me." "I did trust you," Marina said. "But right now, I feel like I am working for a stranger." The line clicked off. I looked at the receiver. That hurt more than the theft. I was losing Marina. I was losing the only real family I had built because of the toxic family I had been born into. But I could not stop now. I opened my laptop and created a new encrypted folder. I scanned the report David had given me. I dragged the file into the folder, then I renamed it. Folder name: evidence_phase_1. I was not going to sue them, not yet. I was going to let them think they were safe. I was going to let them walk further into the trap. I needed to know who else was involved. Graham was the beneficiary, but he was not technical enough to find that folder and integrate it. Madeline was not smart enough to hide the metadata. There was someone else, someone who knew how to strip code, someone who knew how to cover tracks. I looked at the list of board members again. My eyes stopped on Warren Klein, the man who had watched me like a hawk, the man who sat back while Graham and Madeline danced. I was going to find out exactly how deep the rot went. And when I finally cut it out, I would make sure the patient survived. Even if the doctors did not. The digital security suite at Astrogrid is designed to be paranoid. It assumes everyone is a threat until proven otherwise. 2 days after my initial confrontation with the Bennetts, the system flashed a red alert that woke me up from a restless nap on my office couch. Marina was already standing over my desk when I sat up. Her face was grim, lit by the glow of the monitors. "We have a situation," she said. "A serious one." I rubbed my eyes, trying to banish the headache that had been throbbing behind my temples for 48 hours. "Did the press find out about the merger talks?" "Worse," Marina said. She tapped her tablet, casting a stream of data onto the main wall. "Our competitive intelligence bot picked up a signal. There is a high volume of encrypted traffic moving between a server in Raleigh, North Carolina, and a secure Dropbox in San Jose." "San Jose?" I asked, standing up and walking closer to the screen. "Who is in San Jose?" "Northgate DataWorks," Marina said. The name hit me like a physical blow. Northgate was our biggest rival. They were aggressive, predatory, and known for stripping distressed companies for parts. If Astrogrid was the surgeon trying to save the patient, Northgate was the vulture waiting for it to die. "Someone is leaking the deal terms," I said, watching the data packets flow on the screen. They are sending them our valuation, our timeline, and our integration roadmap. They are looking for a counteroffer, Marina confirmed. Someone inside Bennett Integrated Systems is trying to start a bidding war, or they are trying to sabotage this deal so Northgate can swoop in and buy the scraps. Find the source, I ordered. Trace the MAC address of the sender. I already did, Marina said softly. She swiped the screen again. A device profile appeared. Device name: MB_exec_tablet_01. User: Madeline Bennett. I stared at the name. I felt a cold hollowness in my stomach, distinct from the rage I felt toward my father. My father was a thief. Yes, but he was a desperate thief trying to save his legacy. This was different. This was my sister, the golden child, selling out her own family's survival to a shark. Suddenly, a memory from the night before clicked into place. Madeline had invited me to dinner. She had called it a sisterly catch-up. I had gone, wary but curious. We sat in a booth at a high-end bistro. She had ordered expensive wine. She had asked about my life, but her eyes kept drifting. She kept asking vague questions about how Astergrid handles acquisitions and what happens to the executive team after a buyout. I thought she was just anxious about her job. I thought she was looking for reassurance. I was wrong. She was fishing. She was gathering intelligence to feed to Northgate. She sat across from me, broke bread with me, and all the while she was calculating how to stab me in the back. Get her here, I said to Marina. My voice was so cold it frightened me. It is 11 o'clock at night. Colette. I do not care. Call her. Tell her we need to sign a supplementary disclosure form to finalize the funding. Tell her it cannot wait until morning. Tell her to come alone. 40 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open. Madeline walked into the office. She was wearing a trench coat over her pajamas, trying to look professional but looking only frazzled. She clutched her handbag tightly. Colette, she called out, her voice echoing in the empty, dimly lit floor. Is everything okay? Your COO sounded urgent. I was sitting at my desk, the only lamp in the room casting a pool of light on the black obsidian surface. I did not stand up. I did not smile. Sit down, Madeline. She hesitated, then walked over and sat in the chair opposite me. She looked around nervously. Where is the legal team? I thought we were signing papers. There are no papers, I said. I picked up a single sheet of paper from my desk and slid it across the obsidian surface. It stopped right at the edge, inches from her hands. It was the log of the data transmission, the timestamps, the destination server at Northgate, the unique identifier of her iPad. What is this? She asked. Picking it up, she squinted at the technical jargon. It is a record of treason, I said. Madeline went pale. She dropped the paper as if it burned her fingers. I do not know what you are talking about, she stammered. This looks like server gibberish. Do not lie to me, I said. I leaned forward into the light. I am not the little sister you used to ignore in the hallway. I am the CEO of a company that sees everything. I know you sent the term sheet to Northgate. I know you sent them our vulnerability assessment. I know you are trying to sell the company out from under your father. I was exploring options, Madeline cried out, her defense crumbling instantly. It is called due diligence. Northgate might offer a better price. Northgate will chop the company into pieces and fire every single employee within 30 days, I shot back. You know that, so why? I slammed my hand on the table. The sound made her jump. Why, Madeline? Dad trusts you. He thinks you are the savior. Why would you betray him? Madeline stared at me. Her lip trembled. Then, her face crumpled. The polished executive mask melted away, revealing a terrified, insecure child. Because I am terrified, she screamed. The sound tore through the quiet office. Terrified of what? I asked, genuinely confused. Of you, she shouted, tears spilling down her cheeks. Look at you. Colette, look at this place. You built an empire. You are a genius. And me? I am a fraud. I have been faking it for 10 years. I do not know how to run the company. I never did. Dad just put me there because I looked the part. She took a shaky breath, wiping her eyes aggressively. I knew the moment you walked into that conference room. I saw how you looked at the code. I saw how you looked at Dad. You are going to save the company, aren't you? You are going to fix the product. You are going to make it work. That is the plan, I said slowly. And when you do, Madeline whispered, her voice breaking, Dad is going to see it. He is going to see that he was wrong. He is going to see that you were the one he should have chosen. And he will look at me, and he will see a failure. I cannot handle that. Colette, I cannot handle him looking at me the way he used to look at you. I sat back in my chair, stunned. It was twisted, tragic logic. She was willing to destroy the family legacy, willing to let the company burn, just to prevent our father from realizing that I was the capable one. She wanted to sell to Northgate because Northgate would just kill the company. It would be a market failure, not a personal failure. But if I saved it, her incompetence would be exposed by the light of my success. So you decided to sell us out, I said quietly. I did not decide, Madeline sniffled. I did not even know how to contact Northgate. My eyes narrowed. What do you mean? It was Warren, she said. The name hung in the air like smoke. Warren Klein? I asked. Yes, Madeline nodded. He pulled me aside after the board meeting last month. He told me the ship was sinking. He told me that if we went down, I would lose everything. My shares would be worthless. He said he had a contact at Northgate. He said if I passed them the internal data, they would structure a buyout that included a consulting fee for me, a golden parachute, $2 million. I felt a chill run down my spine. Warren Klein, the man who sat in the corner. The man I had sensed was dangerous. He was not just a passive observer. He was the architect of the collapse. He was manipulating Madeline's insecurity to engineer a payout for himself. He knew the company was failing, likely because he knew the new architecture was stolen and unstable, and he was trying to cash out before the truth exploded. He gave you the encryption key? I asked. Yes, Madeline said. He told me exactly what files to send. He said it was just business. I looked at my sister. She looked pathetic, a pawn in a game she did not even understand. She was not the villain. She was just a broken product of our father's ego, just like I was. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was lashing against the glass. I was standing in the center of two hurricanes. On one side, my father had stolen my past work to build a fraudulent future. On the other side, a board member was using my sister to sell the company's secrets to my enemy. If I exposed Madeline now, she would go to jail for corporate espionage. My father would be heartbroken, and the company would collapse in the scandal. Warren Klein would likely slip away in the chaos, claiming he knew nothing. Go home, Madeline, I said, not turning around. What? Go home, I repeated. Do not send another byte of data to Northgate. Do not talk to Warren Klein. Do not tell Dad you were here. Are you going to fire me? She asked, her voice trembling. I have not decided yet, I said. But if you want to leave this room with your reputation intact, you will do exactly what I say from this moment forward. You are working for me now, not Dad, not Warren, me. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I understand. I heard the click of her heels as she ran out of the office. Eager to escape the judgment, I turned back to the reflection in the glass. I had the evidence. I had the leverage. I could end it all tomorrow with a press release. But that was too messy. That was too loud. I needed a different ending. I needed to get all of them, Graham, Madeline, and especially Warren Klein, in one room. I needed to close the trap so tight that none of them could wiggle out. I picked up my phone and dialed Marina. Wake up the legal team, I said. We are not doing a partnership anymore. We are drafting a full acquisition, and I want a clause in there that nobody is going to read until it is too late. What are you planning? Colette? Marina asked. I am planning a family reunion, I said. And I am bringing the receipts. The draft of the withdrawal email was sitting on my screen. The cursor blinked a steady, hypnotic rhythm at the end of the sentence. Therefore, Astrogrid Labs is formally rescinding its offer of partnership. I had my finger hovering over the enter key. I was done. I was physically and spiritually hollowed out. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last week had evaporated, leaving behind a residue of pure exhaustion. I looked around my penthouse. It was cold. It was empty. I had billions of dollars in equity, a staff of hundreds, and a view that people killed for. But I felt exactly like the 22-year-old girl who had walked out of her father's house in the middle of the night. If I proceeded with this acquisition, I would destroy my father. I would humiliate my sister. I would expose the rot at the center of the family name. And for what? For a sense of vindication that tasted increasingly like ash? I decided to let it go. I would kill the deal. I would let Bennett Integrated Systems die a natural death at the hands of the market. I would walk away. I reached out to press the key. The buzzer to my apartment rang. I froze. It was 11:30 at night. The concierge knew never to disturb me unless the building was on fire. I walked to the intercom video panel. The camera feed was grainy in the low light of the entryway. I squinted. A figure was standing there, huddled in a raincoat that was soaking wet. They were holding a cardboard box wrapped in plastic. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart stopped. "Mom?" I whispered. I buzzed her up without asking a single question. When I opened the door, Diane Bennett looked smaller than I remembered. She was dripping wet. Her hair, usually coiffed into a perfect helmet of Southern propriety, was plastered to her forehead. She was shivering. "Colette," she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I ushered her inside, taking the wet box from her hands. "Did something happen to Dad? Is he okay?" "He is fine," she said. Stepping out of her shoes, she looked around my apartment, her eyes widening at the minimalist luxury, the floor-to-ceiling glass. "He thinks I am at a spa retreat in Charleston. I drove to the airport and flew here. I had to see you." I led her to the sofa and poured her a glass of brandy. She took it with shaking hands. I sat opposite her, the wet cardboard box sitting on the coffee table between us like an unexploded ordnance. "Why?" I asked. Diane set the glass down. She reached for the box and tore off the plastic. She opened the flaps. Inside were stacks of envelopes, dozens of them, maybe 100. They were bundled together with rubber bands. Some were yellowed with age. Some were crisp and new. "What are these?" I asked. "Read the return address," she said. I picked up the top bundle. The handwriting was familiar. It was my mother's script. To Colette Bennett, 404 Pine Street, Tacoma. To Colette Bennett, P.O. Box 89, Seattle. To Colette Bennett, Astrogrid Labs, 4th Avenue, Seattle. All of them were unopened. All of them were stamped, returned to sender, or had never been mailed at all. "I wrote to you," Diane said softly. "Every month, on your birthday, on Christmas. On the anniversary of the day you left, I wrote to tell you I was proud. I wrote to tell you I missed you." I stared at the letters. "I never got these. I thought you just let me go." "Your father," she said. The word came out hard, like a stone. "He intercepted the mail. When you moved to Tacoma, he hired a private investigator to find your address, not to bring you home, but to monitor you. When I tried to mail these, he took them from the outbox. He told me he sent them. He told me you were sending them back unopened. He said you wanted nothing to do with us." I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek. "He lied to both of us." "He wanted to control the story," Diane said. "He needed to believe you were the ungrateful runaway. So he did not have to feel guilty for driving you away." She reached back into the box. Underneath the letters was something else, a small, black object. It was a USB drive, an old model, scratching and worn. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I shook my head. 4 years ago, Diane began, her voice gaining strength. Graham came home in a panic. The business was starting to slide. He was shouting at Madeline about innovation. He went into your old room. I saw him. He was on your old desktop computer. He was copying files. I stopped breathing. I did not know what he was doing, she continued. I do not know code. Colette, you know that. I can barely work the microwave. But I know him. I saw the look on his face. It was the look of a man who was stealing something. She pushed the USB drive across the table toward me. So the next day, when he was at work, I went into your room, I turned on the computer, I saw the folders he had opened, and I copied them onto this. I deleted nothing, I changed nothing, I had a feeling, a mother's intuition. I thought that one day, he might try to say that work was his, and I wanted to make sure you had proof that it was yours. I picked up the drive. It felt warm in my hand. You knew? I asked, my voice trembling. You knew about the theft? I suspected, she corrected. But when I saw the presentation slides he brought home last week, the ones for the new product, I recognized the shapes, the diagrams. They look like the drawings you used to make on your napkins at dinner when you were 17. She looked me in the eye. He stole from you. Colette. He stole your mind because he could not control your spirit. I slumped back against the cushions. The validation was overwhelming. For years, I had built my armor out of the belief that I was alone, that I was an orphan of ambition, but I wasn't. My mother had been there, in the shadows, keeping the receipts. I almost quit tonight, I confessed. I almost emailed them to stop the deal. I did not want to hurt you. Do not quit, Diane said fiercely. Then she smiled, a sad, knowing smile. You think you did this all by yourself, don't you? The angel investor? Evelyn Cross? I froze. How do you know Evelyn? Evelyn and I were roommates at Duke, Diane said. We were sorority sisters. We haven't spoken much in 30 years. Our lives went different ways. She went to Wall Street. I went to Knoxville. My mouth fell open. When you left, Diane said, looking down at her hands. When you were in Tacoma, starving, trying to build this company, I called her. It was the hardest phone call I ever made. I begged her. I said, my daughter has a brilliance that her father is too blind to see. Please, just give her 10 minutes. Do not do it for me. Do it for the girl. I stared at her. The 10 minutes at the coffee shop, the seed money, the chance that had started everything. She invested because you are good, Colette, Diane added quickly. Evelyn does not throw money away. You earned it. But I opened the door. I broke. I leaned forward and buried my face in my hands, sobbing. I cried for the years I had lost. I cried for the loneliness I had nursed like a pet. I cried because I had been so arrogant to think I was a self-made woman, when all along, the silent, invisible hands of my mother had been holding up the sky so I could build my tower. She did not hug me. She just sat there and let me cry, sipping her brandy, watching over me like she must have done 1,000 times when I was asleep in my crib. He told me I was nothing, I choked out. He was wrong, she said simply. After a long time, the tears stopped. I wiped my face. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I looked at the letters. I looked at the USB drive. I looked at my mother, who had defied her husband, flown across the country, and broken 30 years of silence to arm me for this war. What do you want me to do? I asked her. Diane stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the rainy city, at the empire her daughter had built. I want you to finish it, she said. I want you to save the people who work for that company. They are good people. They have families. And then I want you to make sure Graham and Madeline can never hurt anyone else again. She turned back to me. Do not do it for revenge, Colette. Do it because it is the truth, and the truth is the only thing that matters. I stood up. I walked over to my desk. I deleted the draft of the withdrawal email. I opened a new message to the legal team. Subject: Final acquisition strategy. Prepare the documents. We are moving forward. Full acquisition. No survivors in the C-suite. I hit send. You can stay here tonight, I told my mother. I have a guest room. I would like that, she said. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a weapon. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to pull the trigger. The definition of a hostile takeover is usually about aggression. But as I sat in the war room with Marina at 6 o'clock in the morning, I realized this was not hostile. It was a rescue mission disguised as an execution. We were not just buying a company. We were buying freedom for 200 employees who had no idea their paycheck was about to bounce. We were buying a legacy just to bury it properly. Are the terms final? Marina asked. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. She had processed the revelation about my mother's visit without a word of judgment, only a nod of grim determination. They are final, I said, but we need to make it airtight. I am bringing in Elias. Elias Thorne was our general counsel. He was a man who viewed emotion as a liability and contracts as holy writ. I had also summoned Marcus Chen, the head of our audit committee. To join us, I needed witnesses. I needed to ensure that when the dust settled, no one could claim I had acted out of personal vendetta, even though that was exactly what fueled me. When Elias and Marcus arrived, I laid it out. I told them everything. The biological relationship, the estrangement, the conflict of interest. I saw Elias's eyebrows shoot up toward his hairline, but he did not interrupt. I am disclosing this now, I told them, my voice steady, so that we can structure this acquisition with a firewall. I am not negotiating as a daughter. I am negotiating as the CEO of Astergrid, and these are the non-negotiable terms. I projected the term sheet onto the wall. It was not a standard merger agreement. It was a list of demands. Clause 1. Total acquisition. Astergrid Labs would acquire 100% of Bennett Integrated Systems, not a partnership, not a majority stake. We would own it all. The price was fair, generous, actually, considering their insolvency, but it came with a hook. Clause 2. The personnel shield. This was the clause that mattered most to me. We guarantee employment for all non-executive staff for a minimum of 24 months, I read aloud. We will align their benefits package with Astergrid standards immediately. That means a 40% pay bump for their engineers and full healthcare coverage. Marcus nodded approvingly. That is expensive. Colette, but it buys loyalty. It buys their lives back, I corrected. They are being led by a ghost and a traitor. They deserve stability. Clause 3. The cleanse. Graham Bennett resigns effective immediately upon signature, I said. No seat on the board, no chairman emeritus title, no consulting fees. He walks away. He is scrubbed from the website, the letterhead, and the building access list by 5 o'clock on signing day. Elias scribbled a note. He will fight that. His ego is his primary asset. He will not fight it, I said, tapping the black folder sitting next to my laptop. I have insurance. Clause 4. The operations shift. Madeline Bennett is removed from the position of VP of Operations, I continued. She will be offered a choice. A 6-month transition role as a monitored consultant to hand over keys and passwords, or a severance package to leave quietly, if she chooses to stay. She reports to Marina. If she steps out of line once, she is terminated for cause. And the IP? Elias asked. The Core X engine they are touting? Clause 5, I said. Full technical audit and intellectual property transfer. We rebuild it from the ground up under our architecture. We erase their proprietary code. Because their proprietary code was mine. Draft it, I told Elias. I want the physical contracts ready by noon. We are not doing this over email. I want them here, in the main boardroom. I want them to look me in the eye when they sign away their kingdom. Once the legal team dispersed to draft the slaughter, I stayed behind with Marina. It was time to assemble the ammunition. I opened the physical black folder I had purchased specifically for this meeting. It was thick, matte, and heavy. I began to organize the exhibits. Exhibit A. The Code Comparison Report. On the left, the time-stamped files from my college hard drive, recovered by my mother. On the right, the source code of Bennett Integrated Systems' new engine. The variable names were identical. The logic loops were identical. It was plagiarism so lazy it was insulting. Exhibit B, the affidavit from Diane Bennett. My mother had written a sworn statement about the night she copied the files, detailing Graham's theft. She had signed it an hour ago in my guest room. Exhibit C, the treason logs, the trace route of the data packets sent from Madeline's tablet to Northgate DataWorks. The timestamps matched the hours we were negotiating. Exhibit D, the financial forensic report on Warren Klein. Marina had dug deep. We found the link. Warren had a silent stake in a shell company that was being acquired by Northgate. If Northgate bought Bennett Integrated Systems for scraps, Warren's shell company would get a finder's fee. He was shorting his own company. He was betting on the crash. I placed the papers into the folder one by one. It felt like loading a magazine into a weapon. "You know," Marina said softly, watching me, "most CEOs would just crush them in court. You are giving them a way out." "I am not giving them a way out," I said, closing the folder. "I am giving them a choice. They can lose the company and keep their freedom, or they can lose everything and go to prison. That is not mercy. Marina, that is leverage." By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the stage was set. The main boardroom at Astergrid was a cavern of glass and steel. I had ordered the blinds raised. The gray Seattle light flooded the room, harsh and unforgiving. There were no pastries on the sideboard, no pitchers of water. This was not a social call. I sat at the head of the table. To my right sat Elias, our lawyer, To my left, Marina. I looked at the empty chairs opposite us. 3 of them. I checked my watch. 1:55. My hands were resting on the cool surface of the table. I looked down at them. I remembered these hands when I was 14, shaking as I held up my laptop to show my father my code. I remembered them trembling as I packed my suitcase in the dark at 22. I remembered them clenched in fists as I rode the bus to Tacoma. They were not shaking now. They were steady. They were manicured. They were the hands of a woman who commanded a billion-dollar valuation. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the filtered air of the tower I had built. "They are here," the receptionist announced over the intercom. "Send them in," I said. The doors opened. Graham walked in first, looking confident, perhaps expecting a partnership agreement that would save his skin. Madeline followed, looking pale and terrified, her eyes darting to me with a silent plea. And bringing up the rear was Warren Klein, looking smug, like a man who thought he was the smartest person in the room. They had no idea. They thought they were walking into a negotiation. They did not know they were walking into a sentencing hearing. "Please," I said, gesturing to the seats I had assigned them. "Sit down." I placed my hand on the black folder. I did not open it yet. I just let it sit there, a silent weight between the past and the future. "We have some changes to the agenda," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a gavel striking wood. The trial of Graham Bennett was about to begin. The air in the boardroom was so still that I could hear the hum of the air conditioning system 42 floors above the street. The 3 chairs opposite me were occupied by ghosts of my past. But today, they were just defendants in a trial they did not know was happening. Graham Bennett sat in the center, flanked by his lawyer. To his right was Madeline, looking like she wanted to melt into the floor. To his left was Warren Klein, leaning back with a smirk that suggested he still believed he held the winning hand. I did not offer them water. I did not offer pleasantries. "The documents in front of you are the final terms of acquisition," I said. My voice was calm, modulated, and absolute. "There is no negotiation. There is no redlining. You either sign them as they are written, or the deal is dead." Graham's lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he billed by the second, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Bennett, this is highly irregular. We have not even discussed the valuation." "The valuation is 0, I said. "I am paying off your debts and capitalizing the payroll for 24 months. That is the price. The equity is worthless because the company is insolvent. Graham bristled. Now see here, Colette, we have assets. We have the Core X engine. We will get to the engine, I said, cutting him off. First, let us review Clause 3. I looked down at the paper. Effective immediately upon closing, Graham Bennett will resign as CEO and chairman. He will surrender all voting rights. He will vacate his office by 5 o'clock on Friday. He will receive no severance package and no consulting contract. Graham slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. I founded that company. You cannot just kick me out of my own building. And Clause 4, I continued, ignoring his outburst completely. Madeline Bennett is relieved of all operational duties. She may remain as a transitional consultant for 6 months, reporting directly to my COO, or she may resign today with a standard severance. Madeline flinched, but she did not argue. She kept her eyes on the obsidian table. It was Warren Klein who spoke up. He laughed, a dry scratching sound. This is a joke, Warren said, tossing the contract onto the table. You are trying to bully us, little girl. But you seem to forget that we have other options. Northgate DataWorks has expressed significant interest. If you want to play hardball, we will walk across the street and sell to them. They appreciate the value of our IP. I stopped reading. I looked up and locked eyes with Warren. I was wondering when you would bring up Northgate, I said. I reached for the black folder sitting to my right. The sound of the heavy cover hitting the table echoed in the room. Open it, I commanded. Warren hesitated. He looked at Graham, then at the folder. He reached out and flipped it open. Exhibit A, I said. This is a log of encrypted data packets sent from a corporate device registered to Bennett Integrated Systems. They were sent 2 nights ago. The destination server belongs to Northgate DataWorks. I watched the color drain from Graham's face. He grabbed the paper from Warren. What is this? Graham asked. Someone is leaking our data? Not someone, I said. Your board member and your daughter. Graham turned slowly to look at Madeline. Madeline? Madeline stammered, tears welling in her eyes. But Madeline was just the courier, I said, turning my gaze back to Warren. Exhibit B, this is a forensic accounting trail. It links you, Warren, to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, a company that is currently in the final stages of being acquired by Northgate. You were shorting your own stock. You orchestrated the leak to devalue Bennett Integrated Systems so Northgate could buy it for pennies, and you would get a kickback on the back end. The room went deadly silent. Warren Klein looked like he had been punched in the gut. His smirk was gone, replaced by the feral look of a trapped animal. That is a lie, Warren hissed. I will sue you for defamation. I will bury this company in litigation for 10 years. You can try, I said. But you will be doing it from a prison cell. That is federal securities fraud. Warren, and I have already sent the file to the SEC. Warren stood up, his face purple. You little... Sit down, I said. The command was not loud, but it had the weight of $1 billion valuation behind it. Warren sat. Graham looked shattered. He looked at Warren, the man he had trusted, the man who had whispered in his ear for years. Then he looked at Madeline. You helped him? Graham whispered. I was scared. Dad? Madeline sobbed. I didn't know what to do. The company was dying. The company was dying because the product was a fraud, I said. I turned the page in the folder. Exhibit C, I announced. I pulled out the USB drive my mother had given me. I placed it on the table. Then I slid the code comparison report toward Graham. Do you recognize this architecture? Graham? I asked. I did not call him Dad. He looked at the report. He saw the highlighted lines. He saw the directory name, CB_capstone_Reverange. He froze. He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not disappointment, fear. You stole it, I said. You went into my room after I left. You took the code I wrote for my senior project. You rebranded it, and you tried to sell it back to me. Colette, Graham started, his voice shaking. I thought you were gone. I thought you weren't using it. You told me I had no talent, I said. You told me I was a dreamer. You told me I belonged in data entry. And yet, the only thing that kept your company alive for the last 4 years was my mind. You have been living off the scraps of the daughter you threw away. Graham slumped in his chair. The titan of industry, the man who had cast such a long shadow over my life, crumbled into a heap of old bones and cheap suits. He covered his face with his hands. I can destroy you, I said softly. I can release this file to the press. I can file criminal charges for IP theft. I can have you arrested alongside Warren. I can ensure that the name Bennett is synonymous with fraud. I let the threat hang in the air. But I am not going to do that. Graham looked up, confusion warring with his shame. Why? He rasped. Because of the 200 people who work for you, I said. Because of the receptionist who has been there for 15 years. Because of the junior engineers who just bought their first houses. If I burn you down, they lose everything. And I will not let your failure destroy their lives. I pushed the contract toward him. So here is your choice. You sign this document, you give me the company, you walk away, you disappear. And in exchange, I save your employees, I save the pensions, and I keep this black folder closed. I looked at Warren. You, however, get nothing. You are fired effective immediately. And if I see your face in this industry again, I will release Exhibit B to the Justice Department. Warren stood up, gathered his briefcase with trembling hands, and walked out of the room without a word. The door clicked shut behind him. I looked at Madeline. And you? I asked. Madeline wiped her face. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. I will sign, she whispered. I do not want to run operations anymore. I hate it. I only did it because I wanted him to look at me the way he used to look at you. She took a deep breath. Is there any way I can stay? Not as an executive, just to learn? I want to do something real. I am tired of pretending. I nodded slowly. You report to Marina. You start at the bottom. If you work hard, you stay. If you play games, you are gone. Thank you, she said. Graham picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He looked at the contract. He looked at the window, at the city he used to think he owned. I am sorry, he said. The words were quiet, almost lost in the room. I know, I said. Sign it. He signed. He pushed the papers back to me. He stood up. He looked older, frazzled. A man who had lost his kingdom but perhaps saved his soul. He walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back. You were always the smart one, he said. I should have seen it. Yes, I said. You should have. He left. I sat there for a long time. The silence in the room was different now. It was not heavy. It was clean. The door opened again, but it wasn't a lawyer. It was my mother. Diane walked in. She looked at the empty chairs. She looked at the signed contract under my hand. She walked over to the window and looked out at the skyline of Seattle. I stood up and joined her. We stood side by side, looking down at the world. It is done, I said. You saved them, she said. I saved myself, I replied. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a golden light on the glass of the Astrogrid Tower. I looked at my reflection. I didn't see the scared girl from Knoxville anymore. I saw Colette Bennett. I turned to the empty chair where my father had sat. I do not need you to believe in me anymore, I said to the ghost of his presence. I just need you to stop using my work to prove I am wrong. I turned back to the work. There was a company to rebuild. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Colette's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Jane Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.